In this episode of Now We Know, we got the chance to interview Senate hopeful Dakarai Larriett, who is running in Alabama. We also got to talk a little bit about his experience with the police.
Dakarai introduced us to the HBO documentary, The Alabama Solution, which takes us inside one of the deadliest prison systems and the government cover-up that was exposed by incarcerated men. Here's our conversation with Dakarai.
Hello.
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 How are you all?
Yeah, doing
Thank you so
well.
much for joining us. And I'm excited to get into our episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing tonight?
Good, good. It's been really exciting, just so much travel with the campaign and just meeting so many different people and forums like this. So I'm just so appreciative to get the word out about what we're looking to do here in Alabama.
Right on, yeah. Well, I think we should hop right into it. I have to say, since we've received any communication about you, I've been kind of obsessed and looking into basically everything because one, you introduced us to the fact that this HBO documentary exists, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And we love a piece of media, but also your connection to that story, and also, I guess, our inherent connection to the system, it just kind of hits home.
Right.
So I think before we start anything, I'd like to just have you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are doing and why you're running for Senate.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you again for having me. And about me, I'm a born and raised Alabamian, and I call Birmingham home. And my mom is a teacher, and my dad was in the army. And that took us around the world, and it really informs who I am. And my true origin story is when I got back to Alabama after his service, I excelled in school, but I could not find work in the state. And that made me leave the state, ultimately going to New York to build a career. And in New York, I threw myself into service work in addition to my corporate calling and worked in harm reduction, worked in advocacy for LGBT and unhoused youth. And that was really where I found my passion and calling and service. And then ended up back in Alabama during the pandemic. And same thing, threw myself into service and joined the board of the University of Alabama Alumni Association, again, advocating for all youth and equal access and cost effective access to education. So, my decision to get into politics truly was when I was in Michigan and I was falsely arrested. That was the spark. And I can tell you more about that.
Listen, I just told Donna, I watched that body camera footage.
Uh,
I saw it.
yeah, yeah,
And I understand this is something that you talk about a lot. This is new to me, and so my reaction to it is a little bit fresher, just because
yeah.
of what happened. And I encourage anybody who's listening to go check it out. It's on your YouTube, and we'll link it below our show notes as well. But can you tell us what exactly happened when you were in Benton Harbor, in a Cadillac, mind you? Real cute car. I said they are hating first and foremost.
I think that was pretty obvious. And gosh, so I was driving while black. That is really it. And not causing any type of disturbance at all. And dropped my friend off at his home, at least attempted to, and was apprehended by the Michigan State Police. And the interesting thing is, you saw the body cam. Even before that interaction, there is a dash cam, right? That's looking at the two troopers. And that's also gone viral to a lesser extent, but it shows the animus with which they approached me. So, again, to add some more complexity and texture here, there was a black cop sitting in the passenger side, and then driving is a white cop. And they both are 100% complicit in making fun of my African name, pronouncing it in a humiliating manner. The white cop says, "Daiquiri, daiquiri. I hope you're not drinking daiquiris." This is
Mm.
before any face to face interaction. So they knew that I was a black man, and they already had made prejudgments about me. And once they get to the car, they lied about the smell of alcohol. There's an interaction where one of the troopers, George Kenya, asserts that I smell fruity. It smells fruity in here. And in the moment, I didn't quite know what was happening, but when we found the troopers' reams of homophobic, transphobic, and racist posts, it made a lot of sense. He was making a homophobic slur that's been around for a very long time. And just throughout the night, I was humiliated. As you mentioned, they were in disbelief that the car belonged to me. They, even after I provided all the documentation, questioned my friend, is this really his car? And then, very conveniently, we found months later, they redacted that questioning from the body cam. So they
Interesting.
knew that there was racial profiling at play. And as you know, we all know, I was 100% sober. We've had analysts look at the video, and one said, I've never seen someone stop that is so obviously sober, right? So I was put through 7 sobriety tests in the cold. I was then taken to a hospital in handcuffs, tested negative for alcohol on the spot. And then they moved the yardstick again and said, well, you need to go to jail and sober up for marijuana. I get to the jailhouse and I'm then accused of smuggling drugs into the jailhouse by way of ingestion in my stomach. I am forced to use the restroom publicly in view of all the officers and booking department and yelled at very rudely, don't flush, which became the name of my book. And as mentioned, got out of jail after one night, took 5.5 months to get the body and dash cam. We get the body and dash cam, and we realized that the troopers were actually attempting to plant drugs in my vehicle. And it's all caught on camera. The trooper, George Kenya, spends about 3 minutes searching through his squad car. And then he says very audibly, I thought I had a stash in here. I don't know where it's at. He's going to refuse anyway. And
Mhm.
then the two troopers getting to the car, again, I'm subjected to standing out in the cold while they're having these huddles in the car, these secret huddles. And they say, he's going to refuse anyway. Search warrant, which is so interesting because Michigan is an implied consent state.
Mm.
So the blood test that I was subjected to, breathalyzer, anything, I would have to do that for all intents and purposes. It's not an option. It's not something that needs a judge to sign off on. The only thing that a search warrant would be needed for would be a Fourth Amendment violation, getting into my car, searching my car. And they knew that I was too sophisticated to allow them to do that. So they said he's going to refuse anyway. So that is where we are now. We are arguing this with the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And initially, the matter was thrown out due to qualified immunity, which is one of the issues I'm running against.
That video pissed me off. That video pissed me
And
off.
it
One,
should.
it, because and Donna, and feel free to chime in here. I'm sure that it's a little bit different being a woman, but I've been pulled over, and the immediate threat, just all the things that you know while growing up. When you were raised, were you also given the talk about how to act when you were pulled over?
Yes. And I talk a lot about that in my book. So my book's called Don't Flush. And obviously, that is kind of referencing that horrific moment in the jailhouse. And I talk about all these lessons that got me through that night. So I'd say 70% of the book is my very detailed recollection of that 6 to 7 hours of terror, but it's interspersed with stories of family resistance and survival. So I juxtapose my stop with my grandparents' altercation with the KKK in 1957. So
Mhm.
this talk has been happening for 60 years in my family.
Too long.
Way too
Yeah.
long. It reminds me of a conversation that I had with Dr. Charlene Taylor. So she has her PhD in criminal justice, and a couple years ago we discussed the what happens after, the arrest and what happens in these experiences that law enforcement has with society and with,
Mhm.
commoners, if you will, and just the overt force, the lies, etc. And a lot of what Charlene was talking about is like, okay, well, how are we going to reform the system? What kind of person do we want to come out of those experiences? And so, anyway, as we have watched that documentary, watched on your unfortunate arrest, and just hearing your accounts of the story, thankfully you didn't have to experience it for too long, but even still the after effects of, let's say 24 hours, and you're still dealing with the ramifications of that, and the
Mhm.
mental toll, and the stressors, et cetera, that puts on someone. It's outstanding, right? And thankfully, it seems like you have been able to redirect your anger to create a cause and to really fight for not just justice for yourself, but to really make an impact in every state that you can, but obviously focusing on Alabama right now. And I'm curious just to learn a bit more about of course, going through something traumatic can make you go maybe one of two ways or one of three ways. Maybe you fight, you're complacent, just let it happen, or
Mhm.
you're just like kind of in the middle and like, oh, I want to do something, but maybe you don't run out of energy and just kind of like waffle back and forth. But what was the sort of catalyst to make you say, you know what? I have that energy. I have that calling. Like, this is what's pushing me forward to this. And this is what I'm going to do.
Great question. Well, I'll address the trauma piece. I didn't even have the vernacular to describe what was happening to me. So I did ultimately get into therapy, and my mother highly encouraged that. The 24 hours later, as you mentioned, that was rough. I got through it and literally went back to work the day that I got out of jail that afternoon. But the real trauma surprisingly happened 5.5 months later when I saw the video.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw the video, I realized just how close I was to having my life ruined. When I saw that conversation at the back of the squad car and it all connected, and I saw our prison pipeline, and I just never expected that to happen to me. I was 42 years old at the time. This was last year. So, with those lessons from my family, I had managed not to have any negative interactions with the criminal justice system. So I'm seeing this and I'm just visualizing myself being incarcerated. And that's where I shut down. And the incident happened at 3 a.m. So my body went into this fight mode every single night at 3 a.m. I woke up and I could not go back to sleep. And this went on for months. And part of my therapy was actually writing, and I also had to write interrogatories about what happened for the legal process. So those started to become the narratives of the story. But for me, the fight came out of a responsibility, thinking about everything that my grandparents in particular went through, and knowing that there's so many other people who are stuck in the system without the resources to fight. In my process, I learned about people who didn't have the $100 to pay bond, and they had to actually stay the 2 weeks that I was quoted for the marijuana test results to come back. And maybe their car was impounded, and on and on and on. And when I started to just visualize that for other people who didn't have the resources, who couldn't lawyer up, I said, no, I have to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately that became running for office.
And I want to add something here too, because I feel like it's relevant to our audience. Donna and I actually met through a corporate job. And you also worked in a corporate job. And when I saw the video, Um, I just saw so much of myself in there because it's like,
Yeah.
as Black people, there are so many hurdles we already are faced with. And when you quote unquote do everything right, all it took was for that police officer to find the right baggie in his trunk to end
Mm.
everything for no
Yes.
reason.
Yes.
And so you say in your campaign, we need leaders who know what it feels like to feel powerless. And I think that is just so important. I mean, I'm in St. Louis, and so one of our representatives, and soon to be Cori Bush, soon to be
Yes.
again,
She's coming back.
is one of those people. She's just one of those people. I've been able to talk with her many times because she's actually around. Wesley Bell, what's up? Anyway,
I've heard about
um, but
that.
it is so important to also to have representation. And I'm looking at the people who are leading Alabama right now. What do you and it to me from far away, it looks like it is an uphill battle. It seems like they are Trump the house down boots, just God miss honey. It seems
Mhm.
like they are just absolutely cuckoo and deep in the pocket of whoever is not
Yeah.
invested in helping people like us.
Yeah.
How are you feeling at this point in the election? And what are you looking to do to hopefully push through the evident barrier that is this red state?
Well, that's a great question. It's about thinking about the campaign very differently than past campaigns and runs. And it's about making it a national race. I say that a lot. This is a race to take back our Senate. So that involves you in Missouri, it involves you, Donna. And interestingly, we are raising a great deal of money outside of the state. And we're using national media to tell the story because it really is a national story. My proposed legislation, the Motorist Bill of Rights, is designed to protect us when we're all on the road. We spend so much of our lives on the road, and Alabama is surrounded by four states. You could be anywhere when something like this happens to you. And that's how we're going to do it and truly create a sense of urgency within the state because we have such a low voter turnout. We just had our municipals throughout the state. It's pretty cool. The whole state votes on mayor and city council in August. So each municipality. The typical turnout you would think would be higher since we're all talking about these races at the same time, 20%, 15%. Then you have runoffs.
Yeah.
It ends up being like two people deciding an election in a runoff. It really
Yep.
is astounding. So we can create this national sense of urgency, speak to people where they are. We can counteract the dark money and the business interests that typically drive politics in the state. And what if we can turn that 20% to 40? That would
Mm.
be groundbreaking and get some different voices out to the ballot.
As Jonathan mentioned, the politics in Alabama seem questionable at best. The HBO documentary, The Alabama Solution, we both watched it, and to
Oh,
me,
yeah.
it was jarring, is the best way
Yes.
to describe it. But as we watch this documentary about the prison system in Alabama, we also get snippets of the attorney general, of the governor, of even news journalists who are going on to publicize their thoughts and their sentiments surrounding the atrocities that are happening in the prison systems so far, that or the those incarcerated went so far as to hold a strike that held for about 3 weeks, and not all of the major prisons had lasted that long, but several lasted for a minimum a week and a half or so. And as we see the documentary kind of pan back and forth between the those that are incarcerated, the things that they're going through, panning back to the outside world, if you will, and seeing what their elected officials are talking about. They're like, yeah, we need to have reform. We need to, do what's right for Alabamans, da 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 da. But meanwhile, on the inside of those prisons, you see people who are in horrific conditions and
Yeah.
are basically almost sleeping in their feces for the most part and not having access to their own beds. They're on the floors. It's truly horrific is the best word that I can come up with right now. But as we hear the
Mhm.
elected officials talk about their sentiments towards the inmates and what's going on, it's like they know deep down inside that it's wrong. They know that there are atrocities that are happening, especially as the documentary mentions how the population of the prisons it's so big. They're like double capacity with a third of the correctional officers that they need. They are losing counselors that help with those that are coming in addicted to drugs. They have inmates taking over those programs because the counselors can't do it anymore. They have
Mhm.
correctional officers leaving because they can't do it anymore because it's so inhumane. And then all of a sudden they wind up with whoever needs a power trip and wants to get paid for it. And that's who gets hired into these correctional officer roles. And it is disheartening. It is just the most disappointing reality check that I think
Yeah.
one can have.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. And there's such low-hanging fruit. I think the documentary calls out the Governor Kay Ivey's solution to build 3 new mega prisons and consolidate everyone into those, which sounds even scarier, right?
Yeah.
And that's all they could come up with after being sued by the Trump administration, by the way. The first Trump administration actually opened the constitutional lawsuits because these are human rights violations in the prisons. So that's the ironic part. It was Jeff Sessions,
Mm.
former Senator Jeff Sessions, Department of Justice that sued the state. So
I
you
can't
can't
believe
make it
I'm going
up.
to agree with the Trump administration on something, but they were on a right path for once. And who knew?
I don't know. Tap tap
So,
tap 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 on that brake. Tap on that brake because
No, I mean, we're not going too far. Don't
follow the
worry.
money. Follow the money.
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, let
Right.
me get in
right,
that.
to build the prisons. Yeah, there you go. There you
Hmm.
go. There's always a
It's,
money trail. And I also want to call out Steve Marshall. This is just how incestuous the whole thing is. Steve Marshall is looking for a promotion to US Senate. So
Mm,
hmm.
he is kind of the figure I would say that's highlighted the most as the state's top cop, the attorney
mhm,
general throughout the process. So after 8, 9 years of this, of rising crime and these horrific conditions and denying justice, and since 2020, the state has spent $57 million defending corrections
mhm.
officers. That's our money, right? He's ready for a promotion to US Senate.
That's
So that is
wild.
one of my key rivals in this race.
Hmm. Um, I want to ask really quick, just because it's happening right now. At the time of recording, it's actually October 17th, which means that tomorrow is the National No Kings protest that's
Mhm,
happening all across our country. And a large part of that is in reaction to ICE. ICE is coming into cities, largely with black mayors, and terrorizing the people. You've seen the videos. If you haven't, your algorithm is something else. I don't even know how
mhm.
you found us. But one of the main points on what you stand for on your website is about national security and defense. Can you speak to a little bit about how you, as a senator, would be handling or approaching issues like this when the National Guard is coming in to Alabama anywhere, as if Birmingham hasn't had enough history with this,
Right.
but I just wanted to know how you would balance these executive orders with your care and concern for the community.
Sure. It all starts with empathy. And I think these leaders have got to realize they are representing people and we've lost that. So we are a nation of laws, right? And we have to know who is coming into our country. That's part of national security. But when I think about deploying the National Guard and trying to raise the army against the public, we're breaking all types of norms. And I just like to say, what happened on January 6th? Where was the sense of urgency?
Hmm.
Where was the collaboration with the mayors and the governors at that time? This is theater, and it is not about keeping us safe. It's about antagonizing folks and creating a scene in which to escalate.
Absolutely. And one more thing too about our law enforcement, as we're talking about the documentary and we're talking about National Guard, um, HB 202.
Oh, yeah.
The word immunity, first and foremost, for anyone who may be committing a crime, let alone someone who's able to hide behind the boys in blue,
Mhm.
is terrifying.
Yes.
Especially after watching your arrest video, which is like,
Mhm.
obviously the best case scenario would be that you would have never had to get out of your car. You would have just gotten a citation and been able to move on and go home. But there are so many times that people are in that situation in the exact same state as you are, and it ends up much worse for them. As we've seen,
Yes.
um, it goes even further once they end up through the pipeline. I wanted to know your reaction to HB 202, how you would
Mhm.
fight against it, if you would fight against it, and what kind of checks and balances might be able to be put in place um,
Mhm.
with this. I'm not as optimistic, which is why I can't be a politician, but I'm hoping you can shed some light on how people are approaching HB 202, especially in Alabama.
Yes, yes. Well, before we get to that, you made me think of something like I am so, gosh, I hate to say it, lucky, right? Lucky that this incident in Michigan happened when I was 42. And even though I'd never had these interactions with police before, I was mature enough to handle it in what I thought was decent manner. But even then, I've learned so much from the public, from posting videos, which at first I was embarrassed, right? I was embarrassed that the incident happened to me. But when I went public, I started to look at the comments and I learned a lot about, for example, my ability to refuse the sobriety test. I didn't know that I had a right to do that. So we almost have to be mini lawyers every time we get into our car. And I mentioned in writing the book, I pieced together my recollection, my friend's recollection, body and dash cam. So I was talking to my friend about the night and we got separated at one point. And I asked him about his experience, and he said he was so terrified that he almost ran from the car.
Mm.
And it just every time I say that or think about it, I get chills. I just got chills again. We would have been shot. They would have said we escalated,
Mhm.
that we brandished a gun, something, right? The trooper even asked me if I concealed carried. There would have been some story spun if my friend had run from the car. Um, and that kind of goes back to those stories of how we survive these moments and you make yourself small. And my words were very muted. I was very short with them. That was my approach, but I was so incredibly nervous. And now that we're in this appeals process and going through the back and forth between the state police legal team and my own, to see the fact that we were nervous being used
Mhm.
as their defense for their actions and qualified immunity, that driving at 3 a.m. made us suspicious. Like, where does this end? Like, we're Americans driving fully sober at 3 a.m. because my buddy works in healthcare and needed to get up super early. And I had to get up and work. We're two upstanding members of the community, and they're using our nervousness from the history that our community has faced police brutality against us in their defense.
Never mind your reason. You were allowed to drive at 3 a.m. or 3
Hello?
p.m. or 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. or not at all. Like you should be able to exist and
Period.
Yep.
First and foremost, I'm driving in my Cadillac. I'm driving in my Cadillac. Fuck you mean? Sorry. I'm just like, I'm driving in the
Jonathan,
Cadillac.
that's certainly not in the laws that if you're driving in a Cadillac, you automatically
Right.
have immunity as
Right.
well. So
How dare he be
Right.
black in the Cadillac?
that's
Lordy.
funny.
Oh my God.
It's so
And I
frustrating. It's just
know.
so frustrating. Watching the video was
It
so
is.
frustrating. And I want to
Mhm.
get back
Yeah.
to HB 202, but you
Yes.
also just jogged my memory about something
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
where I ended up being cuffed. Yes, they shackled me. I was didn't do
Oh.
anything wrong. I was 18 or 19 and
Mm.
my friends wanted to go drinking somewhere. We found this old football field. It was for a high school. It was not in use. And so they were like, oh, we go here all the time. Mind you, I didn't even too much go outside. So I didn't know anything about going out and drinking. I was just happy to be out of the house. And so, of this group of 6 people, I was the only person who didn't drink because I was still afraid, like I just wasn't into it. But also before that, I had some friends that were big talkers. Like I don't really too much know about their life outside of when we interacted in school, but I had remembered they said if the cops come, just run. And I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to be
Oh,
around the cops. So, but that was all the information I had. And so we're
wow.
on this football field in Arnold, Missouri. If anyone from St. Louis is listening, Arnold is where we were, so you already know. One of the most racist parts of the county.
Mm.
And I saw the lights turn on. And so I dart. I'm also the only sober person. So I'm the only person who has control of their limbs. And so I dart and I hide from them. And then, eventually I get to me and they take us in and they fully book me. And we all get, what is it, minor in possession because
Mm.
there was enough for everybody. I didn't drink.
Wow.
They were asking me all these slang terms. Where's the this and that? I didn't know anything about that. Like I was a goody two shoes. Like I didn't know anything about this, but they were making me the seller or whatever.
Right.
Um, and luckily it turned into littering, but I remember showing up to court and of the group of 6, I was the only black person. And I was the only person who actually went physically into court. And I was the only person who had to do any sort of community service.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. Wow. Well, that's a great segue to HB 202. So I'm a numbers guy. In our criminal justice system, in our prisons, more than 50% of the folks are Black. The population of Alabama is about 26% Black. So there you go. We're
Mhm.
over policed. And this is basically making it open season for folks who look like us without repercussions. And I think is really important to call out. Alabama's HB 202 law, the Back the Blue, which passed overwhelmingly in the spring, extends to corrections officers. It's not just police. We normally think of
Mhm.
qualified immunity as protecting the police. So this is getting after that $57 million that the state has spent in defending corrections officers since 2020. They don't want to do that anymore. And they also don't want to fix the problem. So we're just going to block that last recourse of a civil lawsuit after you've done the internal sham investigation. You've gone through all those steps, right? Your last recourse and my last recourse with Michigan was to sue them. And what I see happening is we get to the point where it's completely lawless and there is no accountability. And that's why I wrote the Motorist Bill of Rights, and it's visible on my website, DakariLarriett.com. And we're going to continue building this out. But in a nutshell, it says all interactions with the police must be kind of guided by this. So if you're stopped, it has to be a nationally agreed upon probable cause reason. When you're stopped, if a sobriety test is administered, that test has to be scientific. So I later learned that, I received 7 sobriety tests in the cold. Most of them were not scientifically proven to prove sobriety either way.
Mhm.
Some people are on balance. Some people don't know the alphabet, right? There are all
Right.
these different ways that one could fail a test like that. And a lot of it is subjective. And then finally, and I think most importantly, is the accountability. So you think about it, we're spending all this money outfitting police forces with body and dash cam. That is not being used for transparency and accountability. It is being used and weaponized against us, the public, now. So in my case, I waited 5.5 months, spent $600. They redacted the video. They couldn't figure out a way to spin the prison torture scene, so they completely refused to release it under some weird law.
Hmm.
And then what you saw that went viral, they edited that, redacted the audio, and did all types of little things, handed it over to the judge, and then the judge goes, I don't see a crime here. So literally, all three branches of government failed me. So we've got to bring back the transparency. My bill says within 24 hours of these interactions, all evidence, audio, visual, is released to the principal or the family, right? In case there's a killing. No redactions, no editing,
Mm.
no cost, because cost has become a way to stop justice,
That
Just
would
simply out of
be
the lack of affordability.
right?
It's interesting. I know that you had mentioned there's about 15 to 20% of the Alabamans that have gone out to vote. And, ideally, you'd like to see about 40% or so. In the documentary, they mentioned that to build those mega prisons, they essentially cut the education funds of the state. And
Yes.
to me, there's an obvious correlation. You stop educating the kids, they're going to be uneducated adults that either do not vote or they vote in an uneducated manner. And
Yes.
so, part of this conversation certainly needs to be how do we refund education in general? I mean, we've seen a lot happening on the federal level and, funding and things like that have been cut. But how do we revisit that conversation as well, and tell us a little bit about your approach
Mhm.
to the education funding and programs that y'all
Mhm.
have in Alabama?
That's a terrific question. So, education is the first pillar of this campaign.
Mhm.
And you're right, certain groups are playing the long game on education. And they
Yeah.
know if you can dumb down people enough and create this school to prison pipeline, it just fuels the whole system. So, as a senator, my purview is really going to be federal. So, the Department of Education, we've got to codify our values and ensure that it is funded properly to do what it's supposed to do. And we've got to advocate for it. And my mom is a teacher, specifically, she works in special education. So, I've seen her in action for all my life in that field. So, part of it is education, helping people understand what the Department of Education does. It's not about overreaching, it's about advocating for us, someone who can kind of stand there and be independent from what's happening in these states like Alabama. So, specifically, we just saw the Department of Education let go folks focused on disability rights. That just happened in the last week. We also need the Department of Education to ensure that there's non-discrimination within the schools, independently from the states. That's how a lot of these lawsuits happen that drive accountability within the states. So I will advocate for full funding of the Department of Education, and where it actually sits the functions. That's debatable, but I think there is some value to having a centralized department. And then within the state, it's more about being that bully pulpit and encouraging the state to increase their pupil spending and improve the education outcomes across the state. So I'm a product of one, my mom was a teacher and she got me into the best charter schools and magnet schools that she could find because our inner city schools were failing. Everyone doesn't have that privilege. Just commuting, getting me to the school, that's a privilege that my parents had. They had two cars, right? That everyone doesn't have that in Alabama. We don't really have public transit. So we've got to make sure that our local neighborhood schools rise to a level where everyone gets a quality education. And hold the leaders of the state accountable, and then protect the education trust fund from being raided to build mega prisons that are
Right.
not going to improve the lives of children.
Which is an interesting sort of juxtaposition too, because you have the children that aren't being educated. And then when you don't maybe have the best education, you are more likely to make not great decisions that can
Yes.
wind you up in the very institution that, had that not been built,
Mhm.
likely would have avoided that pipeline from you going from an uneducated child and trying to make a way or figure out a way, and you maybe make not great or sound decisions in the streets, or emotional regulation. I mean, there's so many things that go into education, but that's an interesting place.
Yes, a
And
black child is suspended every 15 minutes in the state of Alabama. The
wow.
suspension rate is about twice the rate of white children. So when I break down these numbers, I think folks realize it's not because the individual is brown, it's the way that we approach them, it's the resources, it's the lack of affirming environments within our schools. That's the problem. The funding at the local school level, those are the problems. The educators that are engaged in the institutions, that's the problem.
As they said in the documentary as well, they mentioned that Alabama has the highest murder rate, the highest overdose rate, the highest suicide rate. It's also a state that basically had to be forced to end the enslavement period there. Like they were holding on for dear life, right? And
Yeah.
so part of that to me, it's about the culture. It sounds like that is ingrained
Yes.
into the systems that are created that
Mhm.
ultimately affect the way that people are raised. And that's why you're seeing some of the outcomes that you're seeing.
Yes. And it's just sad. You know, I get sucked into the comments around the documentary sometimes, and to see folks that are like, well, they deserve it, or it's not supposed to be a resort. Watch the documentary for yourself. Like, we're better than this.
Yeah.
And again, if I share some statistics, 75% of the state professes to be Christian. So, no, we're not saying that prison is a resort, but we literally call it ADOC, Alabama Department of Corrections. This is not correcting people, it's creating more hardened criminals. And if you go to my
Mhm.
website, DakariLarriett.com, I've built out a 6-step plan to fix these issues. If we can't do these basic things ourselves, then we do deserve the federal takeover. But I have a background in harm reduction and served on the board of the National Harm Reduction Coalition. It's not about criminalizing people who use drugs, it's about giving them care and helping them transition away from those substances. So we've got to make these centers of redemption and treatment. And then we also need to stop the supply of drugs.
Yeah.
So the documentary, I don't think really zeroed in on that, but I've learned this in my discussions with the families and with other organizations. It's the Department of Corrections officers that are drug dealing
Mhm.
Hmm.
to the prisoners. Think about
Yeah.
it. You have a
Hmm.
captive audience, and we've got to screen these people to make sure they're not bringing them into the facility. It did mention that they can't really check them because they're so understaffed, which is ridiculous. And job training programs. So while they're there, 18 hours a day idle, let's get them some job training programs so that they're useful when they come out and they're productive. And then the last piece is they're already being farmed out across the state, working in fast food, doing
Mhm.
landscaping. It's essentially a new form of slavery. So
Right.
why can't we treat these folks like individuals that can learn and contribute to society later so that they do not relapse and come back into the system and cause harm to the communities when they get out?
It would seem to me, and even in your own story, you had to leave for job opportunities. So it seemed to me that even people who aren't incarcerated are having trouble finding a path forward. What are the ways that you would be approaching getting those job opportunities, and maybe people who are like entrepreneurs or something like that that can build new businesses? Like, how would you be able to support them as a senator?
Great. Uh, so that kind of moves into pillar 2 and 3 of the campaign. Pillar 2 is shoring up our healthcare, which, by the way, creates the best high paying jobs within the state. And thanks to the quote unquote big, beautiful bill, which I protested with Representative Maxine Waters in Washington, we are going to lose our rural hospitals, and then you start losing primary care doctors, and then you lose the specialists around them, and then you lose everyone that assists those people and all the industries around them. So we're going to experience a snowball effect over the next couple of years where we lose all of these individuals that keep us safe and healthy and fuel the economy. Also, with regard to reproductive freedom and healthcare, we're losing those professionals because they don't want to lose their medical license. Same thing happens. You start losing all the associated professionals around them. So that's the first part is address our healthcare. That's a whole nother animal. And then finally, and specifically, economic opportunity. We want to create opportunities in state for our graduates. So a real pipeline of talent. So if you want to, for example, go into a trade program, you want to learn these skills in high school because we're hearing about those opportunities in other states. That's a great way to keep people productive and build a pipeline for success. And then we've got to think about what happens to folks who choose to go to college. We have this brain drain where everyone heads over to Atlanta after they graduate, or New York, or Dallas. And it's really a shame. You think about it, the state spends about 20 years educating us. And then, right when we are at a moment to start to give back in terms of income taxes, we leave, right? It's
Mhm.
not a good business model. How do we
Right.
keep the customer captive? We've got to give them jobs so they buy their first home in the state. And I did all of those things out of state. And then you mentioned entrepreneurship. In Birmingham, where I live, we have an innovation depot, and you have a lot of different small businesses clustered together in services. I'd like to replicate that model throughout the state so that entrepreneurs like myself can drop in, get services, scale our businesses, and keep those jobs in state.
Mm.
Love that. We have a couple more points of your campaign that we haven't gotten to just yet, and I'm not familiar with the rates of gun violence or anything in Alabama, but I noticed that Second Amendment is one of the pillars of your campaign. Can you talk a little bit about why and what you plan to work on as a senator with that?
Yeah, so Second Amendment, it's constitutional, and I always tell people it's not going anywhere. That right is not going anywhere, but how do we do it more safely? And if you just go back 2 or 3 generations in my family, we're from the country, just outside of Montgomery. So we hunted for food and sustenance. We still farm. We have cattle. That is reality for a lot of folks in Alabama, but it's kind of a wild, wild west right now.
Mhm.
So we've recently passed laws where permitless conceal carry is the law of the land. And we are starting to see these shootouts happen in major uh, centers of population. I think it's a combination of economic opportunity, education, as we talked about earlier, and then just the pure access to guns. So I would like to implement some just common sense things. We don't have to, again, reinvent the wheel. We can look to other states that have done this well, like Massachusetts. We can institute background checks, red flag laws, training programs. When I purchased my gun in Alabama, I had to wait for about a week. So I believe this particular store was doing some type of background check. I got my gun 5 days later, 6 days later, no big deal. So we've got to communicate it in a way that it's not about we're taking away your rights, we're trying to make you safer so you can enjoy your rights, and your family can be safe, your children can be safe.
One of the last things on your pillars is faith, and we had mentioned before that Alabama is heavily Christian, right? And I didn't know, is there tension in Alabama regarding other faiths, and how would you be approaching that as a leader to make sure that it's safe for those people? I mean, we just saw, or we're still seeing and watching everything going on with Gaza and Israel. And
Yes.
I'm just wondering how that translates to the South and especially in Alabama.
Yeah. I was just asked about prayer in school and how if we bring that back, things are going to get better. And I think these are anecdotes. And what I said to the interviewer was, we've got to, one, respect the law and the separation of church and state. Now, I'm a Christian. 75% of us in Alabama profess to be Christians. That's fine. But to hang that over other people's heads, that's not inclusive. And the state is becoming increasingly diverse. Our biggest source of population growth is actually Hispanics. So we're going to see a number of different types of faiths and religions come into our state, and that's a beautiful thing. In terms of the tension, I think that it's being driven unnecessarily. So, for example, Senator Tuberville recently has started this anti-Muslim tirade, and he's done it a couple times. The most recent one happened in the last week, where he said, "Don't come here trying to practice Sharia law in this state," and just very non-inclusive language. So that's my worry about trying to integrate and bring school prayer and things like that. Allow families to worship in the way they choose to, and they can pray before they get to school. They can pray in the car. That's fine. And my personal story is I was baptized as a Catholic, but I largely grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. So we're super sect of Christianity. We don't celebrate birthdays. We don't celebrate Christmas. And at that time, we would not also do the Pledge of Allegiance. So they're apolitical. So I know what that feels like to feel isolated in an academic environment as a child. It's very difficult. So I don't want other people to feel that way. We can practice our faith in our own time in our homes with our family and um, with our other church members, and that's fine.
And you're saying that they are praying in school at a public school?
Well, there's a call to bring that back, and the argument is that we were better and we were safer when that happened.
Okay.
And I wonder who we refers
Right.
to.
I have an 8-year-old son, and I really don't love when I hear the Pledge of Allegiance playing. Like if I drop him off late or whatever, and then I hear the bell ring, and then it comes across like the intercom, and it's like outside also. So it's inside, outside, da da da, and they stand and do the thing. And I asked him about that. I'm like, what do you think about the Pledge of Allegiance? He's like, I don't like it. And I said,
Mhm,
it's up to you. You don't have to do it. I'm not
mhm,
trying to raise a little like Murica kind of kid. And Jonathan, I might have shared with you about a music program that they had a couple years ago where it just seemed like it was all about God and country. And I had,
Yes.
yes, so I had some words with
Yeah.
the
mhm,
music teacher about this because in our household, we don't believe in God. We respect those that do, but that's just not
mhm,
our,
mhm.
not in the Christianity way anyway. We believe in anyway, different
Right.
things. But so I just didn't love that it was very God and country. And
Yeah.
it just seemed very like talk about a pipeline. That's like a
Okay. No. And into submitting to a belief that you don't even believe in and isn't reinforced in your home and came from who knows where.
Right.
Um,
Right.
on the other side, I went to Catholic school my whole life, and that is
Okay.
because the public schools in the city, that's the pipeline. That's a shoot,
Yeah.
actually, a slide.
Yeah.
Like my mom was
Yeah.
also a social worker, and so she worked. Like I literally would sit in the lobby while she was going to advocate for young men who were being put into juvenile detention, and so I
Mm.
could see that it was like, how are they in trouble? They're 12. Like that is a 12-year-old. What is wrong? It's anyway. I will never finish a sentence at this rate, but it's just infuriating. It's just
Yeah.
infuriating that so much control is it's just like powers that be are pulling at these strings, trying to control as many people, and those who don't fall in line. We got three big buildings for you.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 Literally, y'all, I can't even make this up. One of them is going to be called the K Ivy um,
They
Corrections
named it after
Facility.
that old
So
lady.
Who would want a mega prison named after them? Like,
oh
that
my
speaks to some type
god.
of mental illness, maybe, given our history within the state in these facilities. Who would want that? You literally going to say almost every other day someone has died in a facility named after you. Like that can't be good.
Right.
Kay is a different breed. She's about to go
Yeah.
take club pictures outside of that prison every day,
Yes.
leaning over so her hair looks long. you know, she's
Yeah.
that's what she's gonna do.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
You have quite the fight ahead of you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. John, you make me think of something else I talk about in the book is my first experience of just kind of being outside of myself and realizing that truth didn't matter happened in Birmingham in elementary school. And I tell the story, but essentially, I was sent to the principal's office and beaten for something I did not do. And as a young kid, yes, we had corporal punishment back in the day,
Mm.
in the 80s and
This is
90s.
Alabama.
And yes, and imagine you're trying to explain it to your parents, like I was beaten, I didn't do it, and it didn't matter. So I kind of juxtaposed that
Yeah.
story with my experience just last year and how I have the evidence here, and I'm trying to prove my innocence, and it doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter. Truth didn't
Uh,
matter.
I'm just thinking about in that video, I'm still thinking about how still you were, how calm you were. And there's just so many similarities between us. I'm thinking about how small and young you must have felt in that moment because it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You did nothing
Mhm.
wrong. You've done
Mhm.
everything right, like everything, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I was vindicated by the test results, but there was a moment of panic where during the internal investigation process before the lawsuit and all of that, and before we got the FOIA evidence, I said, "Oh my gosh, they are going to fake the drug test because the alcohol test we got in real time." I said, "They're going to fake the drug test to justify everything that happened that night." So during the internal investigation, the lieutenant is questioning me with my attorney. And think about it, he's supposed to be getting to the bottom of what happened with his officers. He asked me, "Did you get your own independent drug test after the incident? And what were the results?"
Oh my god.
Wow.
It's like a
Why does
TV
that matter?
show.
Why does
Right.
that matter? And why would you ask me that?
Because he's an idiot. Because he thought you wouldn't catch on to what he was asking you. That I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
So
work
they
ahead.
had a moment, where they thought they might even fake the drug test results.
Hmm.
But
Mm.
my
Wow.
cousin works in law enforcement, and I texted her almost immediately when I got out of the jailhouse, and she said, "Get your own test now. Get it now. So you have your own copy of what happened that night."
Hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
Man.
Mm. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and, sharing your story, sharing your mission, sharing everything that you are working towards. And we want to be able to encourage our listeners to watch the documentary. We're going to put all the resources, the website for being able to support you, Dakari. And Anything else that you would like our listeners to know, or steps that they can take to help support you and your run for Senate?
Yes. So thank you so much, Donna and Jonathan, for the opportunity to speak about my experience. And I guess what I'll ask everyone is think about those moments in life where, you may be at your lowest and how you can use them to help others. And that's what this campaign is about. And take a look at our website, DakariLarriett.com. Again, this is everyone's race. This is a national race to take back our Senate and to get our legislative branch working for us again. And if you're able to donate, wonderful, please do so. If you'd like to volunteer, we're going to need volunteers from coast to coast for phone banking. That'll start in the first part of 2026. So we can create this national network of folks to get out the vote and get people energized so that we can uptick that turnout rate and win this election and make a difference in Washington and for Alabama.
Dakari, we will be watching. Thank you so much for talking with us and sharing the documentary with us. I absolutely would have scrolled past. I absolutely would have scrolled past, and I'm so glad that we watched. I'm so glad that we got to talk today, and I wish you the best of luck in your race.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the time today, and best of luck to you all.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you.
All right. Bye bye.
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 I think that was good.
That was amazing. That was amazing. Like, honestly, it is. I had a couple moments where I was just tearing up because you can feel it especially when you watch the video of the arrest. You can feel and you can see, and you've been there. I don't know if you've been. Have you ever been arrested?
Oh no, God. No.
Okay, well then, let's not go in that direction.
Yeah.
But I remember just being. I was like, I didn't do anything. I'm just here. Maybe a little trespassing. Okay, maybe a little trespassing.
I mean, there are things that I could probably get arrested for, but
well, whatever.
No, I have not been arrested.
But it's how small you feel, how humiliated you feel. When I was taking my there's a mugshot somewhere in someone's file because we had to take our photo, and they're like laughing at me. They're like, smile. And I'm like, this is like, it's just humiliation. And also it's just clear that they love them some slavery.
Oh my gosh.
Really got to get back to that business. That
we
business
didn't even
model
touch
was
on
working.
that part as much, but that was so prevalent, like that documentary was just so well done and gripping. I mean, I watched the whole thing this morning. Like I woke up, I'm like cleaning. I was listening to it anyway, but
yeah,
it was so good.
It was amazing, and it's emotional, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to watch it. Definitely take the time out. For St. Louisans, we just had the workhouse close a few years ago, but that took a huge concerted effort from activists all around around the country to make sure that the men who were in the workhouse were living. It was the situation that we saw in Alabama was what was going on in St. Louis. But we also have extreme weather, and they had no kind of temperature control. And I don't know if that was true in Alabama. I don't remember that piece,
and
but
they were saying it was really hot. So
I can imagine
maybe
they're not
not
turning on AC
or not AC. Yeah.
And anyway, it's terrible conditions, and I hope that there is a fighter out there in politics, because it is going, like I kept saying, it's going to be an uphill battle, because it really, really is. It's just really quick. I want to talk about fundraising, because the difference in the funds, and granted, it's because certain people will take blood money. So,
right.
But right now, Dakarai is second in of the three Democratic candidates in fundraising, which is amazing. Almost at $80,000 just raised, and that's incredible. But then you look at the number one for the Republicans that are running, and they have raised over $800,000.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a battle, and I really do appreciate that he said it has to go national, because I do think that the point is, even if this race doesn't work out, that a Democrat is going to be flipping a seat. at least eyes will be on Alabama. And I think that's the point of this documentary. And I think that's the point of the conversations like these. There are so many stories like this in so many places. And it takes the people who are willing to get up and risk themselves to share it and get into the buildings with the people who are trying to keep it happening. So totally inspired now. That is not going to be easy, but he's doing the thing. He is absolutely doing the thing. So I'm glad that he took time out to talk to us.
If this episode made you laugh, think, or say, I know that's right,
Or girl.
Same.
Or damn.
Facts.
Or true.
Or vigorously nod, drop us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It seriously helps us out.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much for listening.